Hey, welcome everybody. Simon Rosenberg from Hopium Chronicles. We've got a really exciting event today. We're joined by our old friend Ben Wikler from Wisconsin and also Susan Crawford. We're here. This is an event for Susan. I mean, our community has started engaging in this race in a significant way. This is, an incredibly important race that's coming up in just a few weeks. I'm excited to bring both of them to the Hopium community today. And we're going to start with Ben. Ben, welcome. I want to just remind everybody that the very first event we ever did here at Hopium Chronicles 2 years ago was with Ben making the pitch for his Supreme Court race 2 years ago, of which our community really rallied. And so, Ben, it's great to see you. And I also just want to say thank you for your incredibly spirited, powerful run for chair and for fighting for all of us throughout the last election and in the chair's race. While you didn't prevail, right? We're so glad you're still in this game because you're certainly one of the most popular members of the Hopium community. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much, Simon. And thank you to all members of the Hopium community. I cannot tell you how critical right now, in a moment when so many people want to curl up in the fetal position, the hope and the energy and the work that this community brings to this fight, it is absolutely essential. And Trump's goal is to convince people that they have no power. And by taking action, you not only remind yourself and the community that you have power, but remind Democrats and people who believe in democracy and freedom everywhere that we have power collectively. And that power is visible if you just look at the story of Wisconsin. So when I first joined this community in that first electoral event in 2023, we talked about how Wisconsin had been rigged to break our democracy, how Republicans had rigged our maps to ensure that there was no way Democrats could ever get a majority in the legislature. They'd suppressed the vote. They'd attacked union organizing rights and smashed unions across our state more than any other state in the country. Then they defunded public education, ripped away reproductive freedom, done all the things that you do if you think the public can never remove you from power. And we'd won statewide election after statewide election, but Republicans still had a hammerlock on the state because of their control of the state Supreme Court. And then this community swung into action to support Janet Protasiewicz in her amazing run in 2023. And folks across the country joined you shoulder to shoulder across Wisconsin, a massive uprising, a huge upsurge, record-breaking turnout in a non-presidential year in a spring Supreme Court election in Wisconsin. And we won that race, not even by a little bit, by 11 percentage points in a landslide driven by hundreds of thousands of people who'd never voted in a spring election before, voting for freedom and decency and democracy and a Supreme Court that would actually pay attention to our Constitution instead of the whims of right-wing billionaire mega donors. And Republicans flipped out. They tried to impeach Janet Protasiewicz. They tried to do something that had never been done before in the country, which is a preventive impeachment to stop her from doing her job. And we organized and mobilized, and Democrats, grassroots Democrats and our Democratic legislators, we fought back against that. They stood down. The state Supreme Court actually read the Constitution when they considered a challenge to the gerrymandered maps, and they ruled that the maps were illegal. And in 2024, we had an election on fair maps for the first time since 2008. And I guess 2010 would be the last time, 15 years. And what we saw is that even in a year when Republican turnout shot up everywhere in the country, in Wisconsin, fueled by the hope and the belief and the knowledge that we could change things, Democratic turnout went up in our state. We organized in every corner of Wisconsin. We had candidates come out of the woodwork to run in seats that were now finally competitive at last. And Trump poured everything in, and like everywhere else, he added to his votes in Wisconsin, and he did win Wisconsin by 0.9 of a percentage point. But that was just Trump's effect in a year when globally we saw that incumbents took it on the chin because people were voting for change in a tough economic environment. The down ballot effect of all of this was massive. Tammy Baldwin won at the same time as Trump because a lot of the Trump voters didn't vote down ballot. So we won the U.S. Senate race, and we flipped 10 assembly seats and 4 state Senate seats. We knocked out 2/3 of the Republicans' advantage in each of our legislative chambers. We now have a path to a trifecta in 2026 to actually win unified control of the state of Wisconsin for the first time since 2008 and be able to not just correct the injustices that Republicans wreaked upon Wisconsin, but to actually make Wisconsin a pro-democracy, pro-voter, pro-woman, pro-freedom, pro-worker, pro-student state, the kind of state that everyone wants to be able to raise their kids in. That is within our grasp, except for one threat, which is that Republicans have seen at this moment the impact of the state Supreme Court majority, and they have decided to pour everything they can into trying to win back the majority this spring. And they've recruited a candidate who was the Republican Attorney General under Scott Walker, who defended every one of those terrible decisions in front of our state Supreme Court when he was in that Attorney General position, who is a total extremist politician, MAGA warrior. And they're funneling money in to support him. And it's going to take everything we can to elect someone far greater to that seat, who can ensure that the pro-democracy, pro-constitution majority in the state Supreme Court can continue, and who can carry on the legacy of the retiring amazing state Supreme Court Justice, Justice Bradley, whose torch has burned brightly even in the darkest years. Susan Crawford, who you'll hear from in a moment. The Judge Susan Crawford is the kind of judge that everyone dreams of being able to present a case in front of, because she actually considers the law and considers the facts of the case instead of just doing what a right-wing mega donor might wish. And that is an existential question for our state, but it's an existential question for all of us as a movement. Because at this moment, Republicans are acting like they have impunity, that the rule of law doesn't matter, that they can just put in lawyers and prosecutors and judges who will rubber stamp their every wrongdoing, their every crime. And if they can roll to victory in Wisconsin, the ultimate battleground state, the only state where 5 of the last 7 presidential elections has come down to less than 1 percentage point, they will have impunity to do this nationwide. And we have to ask ourselves whether we're ready to fight in this moment. And when a fight is called for, there is no community more ready than the Hopium Chronicles community. So I am so fired up to be here with everybody today in this moment when, once again, everything is on the line, in a moment when people nationally are looking for a source of hope, of belief, of demonstration that we can actually fight and win in this moment of darkness. And there is no bigger election in the first half of this year in the entire country than the Wisconsin State Supreme Court race on April 1st. So this is your call to action. We need you to step up into this fight, to sign up for volunteer shift after volunteer shift, to donate more than you expected to donate this spring to Susan Crawford's race. This fight is for all the marbles. It's a fight that could shape the future of the House and Senate and presidency on a national basis, the future of freedom and democracy in Wisconsin, and this elemental question of whether the people who believe in the American experiment will prevail in this moment. It comes down to this one little state in the Midwest, to Wisconsin on April 1st, and what each of us does between now and then. So for all those reasons, thank you for digging deep. Thank you for doing everything you can. And I'm so excited to turn it back over to Simon to introduce Judge Susan Crawford, our hero and champion in this fight.
Ben, thank you so much. That was amazing. And I love you, brother. And listen, if people aren't signing up to volunteer and giving money after that, I don't know what we can do. Sorry for the blurry there. But Susan, welcome. Listen, just give us, Ben, I know you got to run. So if you got to jump, that's great. And that's okay. And Susan, thank you so much for being with us. Please give us an update on the race. Tell us more about yourself. Introduce yourself to this plucky community of proud patriots all across the United States, who I think we're going to be able to round up more supporters for you today. But welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks so much, Simon. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and to, get our message out to the Hopium community about the stakes of this race, how critically important it is. As Ben just made the case for it, but I'll just reiterate that this race will decide the future, certainly, of the state of Wisconsin. Likely will have national implications, and it is going to affect the personal rights and freedoms of every single Wisconsin resident. And it's happening soon. The election is April 1st. That is 46 days away, I believe. So it is coming up quickly. And the choice that is going to be presented to voters is whether they want to have a justice on the Wisconsin Supreme Court who will be fair and impartial, who will apply common sense, and who believes in protecting the rights and freedoms of all Wisconsinites, or whether they want an extreme politician like my opponent, Brad Schimmel, who has not only spent his career pushing an extreme political agenda, but has actively worked to take rights away from people. And I've been spending a lot of time traveling all over the state of Wisconsin, talking to as many voters as I can get in front of me. And I think voters want to have a Supreme Court that is looking out for their best interests, protecting their fundamental rights, and being fair and impartial. They don't want to politicize the Supreme Court, and they certainly don't want somebody who is going to use the court to press a far-right political agenda. So let me tell you a little bit about my background and what brought me to take the step of running in this critical race. I grew up right here in Wisconsin, in a small city called Chippewa Falls in the western part of the state, a place with a great sense of community where people knew each other and looked out for each other. I was one of four. I went on to attend law school at the University of Iowa. Started my career briefly in the state of Iowa, but was looking for opportunities to get back to my home state of Wisconsin, and was fortunate to get a job at the Wisconsin Department of Justice, where I began my legal career in Wisconsin as a prosecutor, handling the toughest felony cases all the way up to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And as a prosecutor, I always worked hard to do justice fundamentally, to make sure that people who committed violent crimes were held accountable, to make sure that crime victims' rights were respected in the process, and that our communities were kept safe. I also worked as a healthcare fraud prosecutor, and many times in those cases, I was making sure that corporations who harmed our community, tried to steal funds that were designated for healthcare services for people living in poverty, were also held accountable. I think that is an equally important part of community safety and public safety, and one that's an important part of my background. I later was in private practice, and I stood up for the rights of Wisconsinites in our courtrooms, often when the government, and by that time it was a very conservative governor, backed up by both houses in our legislature being dominated by conservative Republicans, were taking away rights from people. So I represented public school teachers when their rights in the workplace were stripped away by the Walker administration and the legislature. I also fought to protect the rights of Wisconsinites to vote when the legislature and the governor enacted the strictest voter ID law in the country, and then were very unprepared to properly implement it. So the most vulnerable Wisconsinites, elderly people, disabled people, people living in poverty, were unable to exercise their rights to vote. I also represented Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin and their doctors in our courtrooms when the, again, Republican governor, legislature tried to get in between women and their doctors. And again, through all of that work, standing up for the fundamental rights of Wisconsinites in our courtrooms, I got protections for people. I'm now a judge. I'm a circuit court judge here in Dane County. That's Madison, our capital city. And I handle every kind of case that comes through our trial courts. I make sure every day that everybody who walks through my courtroom, sits in front of me, gets a fair shake. I don't care whether somebody has a $500 an hour lawyer sitting next to them, or they're just there sitting by themselves, representing themselves. I want to make sure that everyone is heard and that they leave their courtroom feeling like they got their day in court and were treated with respect by the judge. My judicial philosophy is pretty simple. I work hard to get the facts right in every case, to make sure that I am applying the law fairly and accurately and impartially, and that I am making decisions that protect people. In my view, that's what laws are for. They are to protect people's rights and, often their property as well. And I think it is critical as a judge to make sure that when I'm making decisions that I'm not viewing it as some abstract principle that I'm announcing. I have cases in front of me that involve real people and real disputes and problems, and it's part of my job to do what's fair and right. So I apply common sense to make sure that I'm making good decisions. And that is what kind of justice I'll be on the Supreme Court. Now, let me talk a little bit about my opponents so people can understand what the stakes of this race are. My opponent, Brad Schimmel, a former Republican Attorney General who served for one term in Wisconsin before voters booted him out, is the most extreme candidate to ever run for this office in the history of Wisconsin. He makes Justice Protasewicz's former opponent really look like a moderate in comparison. Brad Schimmel has spent his career focused on politics, partisanship, and self-promotion. Looking at his career as a partisan politician, he tried to restrict access to reproductive health care for women, trying to defend indefensible laws that ultimately were found unconstitutional by the courts and spent over $1 million in taxpayer monies doing so. He, back then and still even today, as a candidate for justice on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, advocates for the enforcement of an 1849 law in Wisconsin that would operate as a criminal ban on nearly all abortions in Wisconsin, without any exceptions for rape, for incest, even for the health of the mother. And that is not the only way Brad Schimmel has failed Wisconsin women and families. As Attorney General, he let a backlog of sexual assault kits, those are the kits that contain the evidence that can be tested for DNA to determine who the perpetrators were. A backlog of 6,000 kits went untested for years while Brad Schimmel was Attorney General. He was the head of the Department of Justice, and that was the department whose job it was to get that testing done. In a period of 2 years, he only managed to get 9 kits tested out of the backlog of 6,000. You know, and justice delayed is justice denied. The children and women, primarily, who were the victims of those crimes had to wait, and perpetrators, meanwhile, were on the streets. That is not something that should have happened. Brad Schimmel has always pursued an extreme political agenda at the expense of Wisconsinites. He wasted millions of dollars in taxpayer funds, including on right-wing causes, like trying to overturn the Affordable Care Act. If he'd been successful in that case, it would have resulted in hundreds of thousands of Wisconsinites losing access to their health insurance. He was also one of just a few attorneys general in the country who refused to get the state into a big multi-state lawsuit to hold the opioid manufacturers accountable for flooding our communities with addictive drugs that destroyed so many families and individuals in Wisconsin. At the same time, he was taking more campaign contributions from the opioid manufacturers, from the pharmaceutical industry, than just about any other candidate has in Wisconsin. So that's Brad Schimmel. He's always going to put his extreme politics ahead of being fair and impartial or standing up for the people of Wisconsin. We got to make sure that he does not end up on our Wisconsin Supreme Court. He'll restrict women's rights. He'll look out for his special interest donors, and he'll jeopardize the future of our kids in our state. So that's why I'm running. I think this is absolutely a critical race. I'm here to stand up for Wisconsinites and protect our rights under the Constitution and our state laws. And I just, again, deeply appreciate the opportunity to tell you a little bit about this race, why it's so important, and to tell you a little bit about my background. So thanks so much, Simon.
Susan, that was very comprehensive. So thank you. And I really don't have too many more questions because I think you answered a bunch of the ones that I was going to ask. But let me ask, first of all, are you having a good time? Are you having fun? I mean, what's it like to be out there with people right now? I mean, we're in a time of tumult in the United States in our politics, and you have the opportunity, the blessing, right, to be out with real people talking about their lives, their futures. I mean, what are you hearing? I mean, give us a sense of what people in Wisconsin, how they're thinking of this moment, your race, and what you're hearing on the ground.
Well, I'm hearing a combination of both enthusiasm and terror, I guess I'll say. You know, people are really excited by my candidacy. They're pinning a lot of hopes on our Wisconsin Supreme Court to protect us, to be that kind of firewall against what's happening nationally and the chaos that they're seeing coming out of Washington, D.C. And people are afraid of that. and are uncertain about what the future is going to look like. But they also are very energized by this race and are looking at it as one, concrete positive thing that they can put some time and energy and resources into to make sure that we do have that layer of protection right here in the state of Wisconsin. And I'm having a lot of fun getting out visiting with voters all around our state. We have a beautiful state, and I joke with my husband every time I come home from a road trip. I'm like, that town, I could live there. That's a great town. He's a little bit afraid of where this is going to lead us.
Well,
it's a great city.
it is. I mean, it is so different, right, from being a judge to now being a candidate like this, right? And it is. I've been doing this a long time, and there really is a blessing when you can go out and talk to people about their hopes and dreams, particularly in a time of crisis in the country. And I guess that's my next question, which is I think what's going to be interesting when I release this video tomorrow into the Hopium community is in the last few weeks, I think many Americans, and particularly Democrats or people who believe in democracy, regardless of party, have grown to appreciate and understand the importance of our courts and our legal system, perhaps in ways that they may have not understood before. The federalism, that is at the core of the way our government is organized, and the importance of the law and rule of law when it's being challenged. And I wonder if you have any observations on what you're seeing. I'm not asking you to comment on individual cases that you may not know about, but I wrote a column today at Hopium about how much what we're seeing is a trampling of the rule of law in ways that was really kind of unimaginable, I think, to many people. Particularly what's been unimaginable is that the Republican Senate has joined in on the effort and enabled Trump and Musk, for example, to to disregard and become a lawless party. And or a lawless government. And I'm just wondering if, as somebody who's made your career in the law, just how you see this moment and how it reflects on your race and for the people of Wisconsin.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. I think that this race is an opportunity for good people in Wisconsin and for those folks outside of Wisconsin that want to support and work to support my candidacy, to send a loud, clear message. This is the first opportunity we've got since the November election to stand up for democracy, to stand up for the rule of law, and to stand up for our courts, because our courts are under attack in Washington, D.C. right now. And I think that having a clear, resounding victory on April 1st is going to send a loud message back to Washington, D.C. and all over our country that the people, not just in Wisconsin, but across the country, want to have our laws followed, that this is a nation of laws, not of, primarily men, but men and women. Just looking at who's making those decisions in DC. But I think it's an opportunity to send that message and to start the pendulum swinging back to a place where we've got laws that are being enforced and followed in our country. Now, I'm not saying that it's a magic switch that's going to be flipped on April 1st if we can win this, but it is the beginning of a movement, I think, to make sure that our laws are followed in our country.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about Hopium, about how for those of us who believe in democracy, how getting wins right now are so important. That Trump is all about strength and winning and intimidation and a sense of inevitability, right? This is how strong men operate, which is there's no reason to really challenge us. We're just going to keep winning, and you need to sort of withdraw from civic life and withdraw from challenge. And it's why you're right, Judge Crawford and Susan, is that, this for us as a community and as a country, getting a win here will really matter because we need to, I think, in order to build this effective opposition to Trump and to the illiberal movement that has overtaken the Republican Party, that we need to demonstrate that we can win, that we have momentum, that and to build on these. And I talk about how we like to build and celebrate the wins when they come, and to continue to get more, right, to keep going. And so I do think that of all the races in the country, as Ben said, this is the most important one in the country over the next few months. And first of all, I'm grateful that you've had the courage and to go see, fight for this thing, this seat at this critical time. You are in such a contentious political state. People talk about Midwestern nice. Politics ain't nice in Wisconsin. It's a brutal sport. And so, having the courage to go out in this time of enormous challenge and go fight for the rule of law and justice and decency is just, thank you for that. It matters. It's an inspiration to me and to all of us. And I guess I know you got to go. So is there any final words you have for our community here today, Susan?
Just one final comment, which is that I think that those who are making decisions, failing to follow the laws, and just taking a sledgehammer to our government are counting on the folks who believe in our laws just sitting it out, staying on the couch, not getting out there and not fighting back. They can only win and prevail with that lawlessness if the good people who believe in the laws don't fight back. I think that's fundamentally what this is all about, is fighting back. So again, Simon, thanks so much for the opportunity to talk to this community today and to talk to you. Thanks for the great questions.
Susan, thank you so much. Good luck. And everybody, you know what you got to do, right? Please make a donation today. Sign up for volunteer shifts. Many of you have already spent time working Wisconsin. I mean, there's probably thousands or even tens of thousands of people in the Hopium community that have somehow contributed to Wisconsin politics over the last couple of years. And so we got a big race here. Great candidate. It was great to hear from Ben. Folks, you know what to do. Thanks so much. Take care. Good luck, Susan.
Thank you, Simon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.